Hi, welcome 6R to our next section, section 2.4, dividing decimals. In this section, we're going to learn how to divide a decimal in a whole number, and then we're also going to learn how to divide a decimal by a decimal. And along that process, we're also going to see how we would round when we're talking money. Okay, well, first of all, let's go to our vocabulary. First, we need to learn about the division, what each part is in a division problem. First of all, your quotient. The quotient is the result or your answer from division. And when doing a division problem, the quotient is on top of the division problem. As you can see over there, above 574.75 is where the answer would go. The dividend is a number that is divided by another number. And then our divisor is a number by which another number is divided. So in our problem, 574.75 divided by 11, note that the dividend is the first number and the divisor is the second number. Okay, when dividing a decimal by a whole number, your first step is just set it up as a normal division problem. Remember, your dividend goes under the division symbol. Again, most time you'll hear me refer to it as it goes under the house, and then the divisor number, the 11, goes outside the house or outside the numbers. That's your first step. The next step is to line up the decimal point in the quotient with the decimal point in the dividend. All we do here is just take the decimal point that's in your dividend and move it up into your quotient. So we move from here up to here, and we leave it there. That's going to remain there as part of our answer. Step 3. We divide. We just divide as normal. We find out how many times does 11 go into 57. That was 55. Leaving us a remainder of 2. We bring down to 4. 11 goes into 24 twice. There's our 2. It's 22. We have a 2 left over. Bring down our 7. And so on till we get to a remainder of 0. Now, in every instance, we may not get a remainder of 0. But our instructions will often tell us how far we need to keep dividing by. So they may tell us to round to the hundredths. If we have to round to the hundredths, then we must at least divide out to the thousandths, because again, that's where we round from when we're going to the hundredths. If it says to round into the nearest hundredths, we at least need to go to the thousandths. If the instructions do not tell you what to do, then I ask that you go out at least 4 decimal places. Okay, and then if you still have a remainder at that point, you just leave it down there. You don't bring it up and put R equals anything like that. You just go out 4 decimal places. I think for the most part, most of these problems, though, I think 3 is probably the farthest you need to go out. But you might catch 1 or 2 where, again, you may go out 4 places and still have, you could still go on forever. But again, that's as far as we have to go. So that's it. That is your third step. You just divide. So now it's your turn. The next step, or the next concept, is dividing a decimal by a decimal. This one can get a little complicated in step 2, so I've provided you with 2 different ways to do it, or think about it. But first, step 1, we just set it up as a normal division problem. Take our divisor, put it on the outside, take our dividend, put it on the inside of the division problem. That's where we start. The key here is when dividing a decimal by a decimal, we can't have our divisor with a decimal. We have to make it a whole number. And there's, again, a couple ways to do that. First, we can multiply by a power of 10 that will make the divisor a whole number. In this case, all you're really doing is counting what place value do I have in my decimals. I go out to the hundredths, so I can multiply by 100. So if I multiply my divisor by 100, it becomes 317. I also have to multiply the dividend by 100, and it becomes 380.4. So again, the key is we want to get rid of the decimal in the divisor. One way is to just figure out what place value does it go out and multiply that by that power of 10. So if we went out to the thousandths, we would multiply by 1,000. If we went out to the tenths, we would multiply by 10. In this case, we're in the hundredths, so we multiply both the divisor and the dividend by 100. So we go out there, and it becomes a whole number in our divisor, and our dividend may or may not be a whole number. It's okay if it isn't, because again, in the previous concept, we learned what we do. We would just bring our decimal up. Okay. Now, there is another way to look at it if you don't want to divide or multiply by 100 or multiply by there, and it's just moving the decimal point. And I'll show you in this next example. Okay. Some people, again, don't like to multiply or look at it that way. Some people just want to look at it and say, well, I'm just going to move the decimal in my divisor just by making it a whole number. So as many places as I move it in my divisor, I have to move it in my dividend. So if we go back and look at our original problem, 3.17 divided by 3.804, if I move my decimal place, see, look, I move it 1 and 2. Since I move it 2 into 3.17, I also have to move it 2 in my dividend. And it goes over to the 8 and then to the 0 to give us our final answer of 317 divided by 380.4. Okay, so again, rather than multiply by, in this case, I would have multiplied by 100. All I have to do is move the decimal place over 2 in my divisor, and then I can do the same thing in my dividend. You just have to remember what you do to your divisor, you also have to do to the dividend. So again, this method is what most people usually do. They say, okay, I know I just have to move my decimal place as many places over to make my divisor a whole number. Whatever I move it over, I have to do it to the dividend too. Step 3, we just line up the decimal point, bring it up on top, just like we did in the first example where we're dividing a decimal by a whole number. In this case, we are now doing the same thing. We have changed our divisor into a whole number, and our dividend's got a decimal in it. We move it up and move on to step 4, which is to solve the problem. Okay, so in this case, we follow through on our division. 317 goes into 380 one time, bring down, or leaving us with 63. We bring down our 4, and that goes into 634, goes into, our 317 goes into 634 twice, and our answer is 1.2. Okay, so the steps are very similar. We just have that second step where we can't divide by a decimal. We have to change our divisor so that it is a whole number, and we move the decimal point over. Okay, now it is your turn. Again, I'm going to help you set up the first one. In the first case, in A, I have a decimal. If I move my decimal place over 1 to make it 15, I also have to move it over in my dividend to make it 1,108.5. Okay, now the rest is up to you. Good luck. Okay, our last piece is dividing decimals and having to round it. And we're generally, again, the instructions are either going to tell you to round to a certain decimal place, such as thousandths or hundredths. But there's some that make sense that you just go ahead and do it to the hundredths. You automatically round to the hundredths. And the easiest example of that is money. When we pay for things, we only go out to the hundredths place. So if we're trying to find a dollar amount, we need to round to the nearest cent. Well, the nearest cent is the nearest hundredth. So in this case, you buy a pack of 8 football cards for $2.15. Find the cost per card. It says round to the nearest cent. Step 1, we set up the problem. Price per card equals the price of the package divided by the number of cards in the package. Oops, it doesn't look like the division symbol came up. Sorry. Step 2, go ahead and divide it. And step 3 is round to the nearest cent. So we put our 8 as the divisor, our 215 is the dividend, and when we divide, our answer is 0.268. Now remember, I only have to go out to the thousandths place because I'm going to be rounding to the hundredths to get the nearest cent. So in this case, I have 0.268. My final answer would be 27. I would round to the nearest cent. So we'd say the cost per card is 27 cents. We wouldn't say it is 26.8 cents. We would say 27 cents by rounding. Okay, so this is just a division problem where they're actually asking you to round to the 100th place, or in this case it says the nearest cent. Okay, your turn. You buy a pack of 12 football cards for $2.15. Find the cost per card and round to the nearest cent. Well, that does it for this episode. Remember to fill out, if you didn't get a sheet, please make a summary of what you learned and jot down any questions you may have. If you don't have any questions, please create a problem, a division problem that can be difficult. If you're going to be using decimals that are going out, please don't go out more than 5 decimal places. All right, thank you.